Hello, everyone. This is Dorie Clark, ding, and we are here with Better, our weekly Newsweek interview show. And our guest this week is Jennifer Brown. She is the author of the new book, How to Be an Inclusive Leader, second edition. And she has been a diversity and inclusion consultant for nearly 20 years. But Jennifer, I want to start somewhere else, which is you actually pivoted because earlier in your career, you were in the arts, you were an opera singer. Can you talk about that and making the transition into the world of diversity? What the heck happened there?
No, I came to New York to make it, the stars in my eyes. And I got my master's in vocal performance at Manhattan School of Music. And this was in my late 20s. And I worked hard. I was so excited. I was going to go Broadway all the way. And unfortunately, I injured my voice through practice, which is arduous, as you can imagine. And for some reason, I just kept injuring it. And I unfortunately had to get surgery a couple times and recovered. But the voice is a very delicate instrument. And I think you realize at some point, wow, this keeps happening to me. Can I really make a living doing this? Can I do 8 shows a week? And the answer was no. I'm going to need to find another way. And strangely enough, it ended up landing me on a different stage, and one that I would subsequently come to love, which is the stage of training and facilitating adults in conversations about leadership in the organization, and fell in love with that, and have absolutely been able to feel now as a keynoter that I get to be on stage. I get to be with people, but the topic is different. And it's something that I dare I say resonates with me on a personal level in a much deeper way, I think, than I ever imagined possible. So I was meant to use my voice, but just not as a singer.
Amazing. Well, as someone who has injured my voice through just being sick, I have deep, at least temporary empathy for
It's
that.
temporary.
Yeah, but
I know
yes,
you feel what I'm talking about.
I do. I feel it very acutely in this moment, Jennifer. So thank you. That's great. So, okay, you talked about your personal connection to some of these issues, and so I think one of the really interesting things about your work in the diversity space is you're gay. I know this because we know each other.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think to the public, let's say at large, you are someone who doesn't particularly, I say in air quotes, look gay. And so I imagine that this might create interesting moments or interesting tensions or opportunities in terms of your personal experience and in terms of the work that you do. Can you talk a little bit more about how that has informed your work and what that looks like?
Yeah, thank you for asking. And we know so much more now about so much that's invisible about our diversity dimensions, not just sexual orientation, but true gender identity, true ethnicity, and so many more things. And it's a really rich conversation these days. But it used to be very binary, and it used to be very much, how we looked masculine or feminine presenting, right? And it was very, very binary. And I'm so grateful that we can have a more nuanced and detailed conversation these days about identity and about gender expression and gender identity. So, yeah, I've been with my partner for 25 years. My goodness, came out in my early 20s, but I was closeted in as a performer. Absolutely. Maybe out to friends and, teachers and things like that. But I thought it would be a big liability in terms of my ability to work, and then closeted in the corporate world. And then subsequently we would, as a company 20 years ago, when I started Jennifer Brown Consulting, we became LGBT and woman owned and certified. So proud of that, and kind of gave me a little bit of a bridge to have the conversation. But Dorie, this, like, we come out every day. We have to continue to come out, because for me and so many professionals, we're changing situations often, and contexts all the time. And most often it is presumed that I am, heterosexual, and it's a great opportunity to open a door, but it doesn't mean that it's not without fear and trepidation around feeling discredited, feeling like I don't have like credibility, authority, that the people are going to be distracted by this and not really be listening to what the very important things that I'm there to teach. So, and I'm usually feeling like the only, particularly in executive rooms, which is where I find myself, kind of being the person that's taking the big leap and taking the risk to disclose. And it's something that I've gotten incredibly good at, but it's a lot of practice, and it still very much is on my mind and heart that so many of us don't bring our full selves. We're in a room and we're fearing for our psychological safety and fearing for that discrediting and that those stigmas and those microaggressions that we may be faced with, and people's biases that we may be triggering when we share all of who we are. And that's fundamentally like what I work on with audiences and leaders, is to say, what kind of workplace do you want? Do you want a place where you've got people who are closeted about a whole bunch of things, both visible and invisible? Or do you want a place where this is actually a safe place? Because without feeling safe, we can't create. And that's fundamentally, when we talk about the business case for this stuff, there's a link there that's very strong. And if you don't accomplish the belonging, you're not going to get the best from people, because they're too distracted with their own safety or lack thereof in your culture. And it comes down to leaders, what they say, what they do, walking the talk, taking a strong stand, having a zero tolerance. And some leaders get it, and some companies are like charging ahead. And I think we're seeing these days the companies that are pulling back, in response to pressure. And, I think that makes a lot of us really disheartened to see that. But there's equally as many examples of courageous leadership, I think, going on.
That's great. We're here with Jennifer Brown. She's the author of How to Be an Inclusive Leader, second edition. And this is Dorie Clark with Better, the weekly Newsweek interview show. For folks who want to learn more about Jennifer, by the way, here's a website with all the links, all the things that you can possibly want to learn about Jennifer and her work. Now, Jennifer, you raised an interesting point, which is talking about belonging, which is now, I would say, in kind of the new wave, the new vogue. D&I became DEI, which became DEIB now. First of all, I'm not really sure who decides. I'm like, is there a vote? Who knows? But somehow belonging has entered the conversation in a big way. And so I would love it if you could talk a little bit more about how do we know what belonging is? I'm sure there's a better definition than we know it when we feel it. And how does it actually factor in? Why is this something that is now we're discovering integral to the diversity conversation?
Yeah, well, the D and the E and the I come with a fair amount of baggage, interestingly. So I think there's like a pure sort of branding element to this too, which is, if you can't sort of combat the feelings and stereotypes that people have about this work, and on the negative side. So I think belonging is a fresh word. So I think there's an element of a blank slate there that feels good. And also it's a word that resonates particularly with younger talent. So I think that those two things make it very appealing. And it is a bit of, when you feel it and you see it. I know it feels intangible, but to me, it is the outcome or the product of having that diversity, which is the D, right? Having that mix of visible and invisible identities, having that E, which is equity, which is looking at those systems and processes and saying, ooh, the playing field isn't level. It never has been level. So how can we true it up, to be truly equitable for all? The I is really manager behavior, leader behavior. How do I incorporate these things and ensure the environment where that diversity can really shine and really, create that wonderful input? And so that belonging, I think, is an outcome of all of those things being attended to, all of those things being done well, results in us feeling this deep sense of like being seen, being heard, being valued, being at the table, being that the work is happening in these institutions that we work at to true up our systems and processes. And the workplace wasn't built by and for a lot of us, right? It wasn't built by us. It wasn't built to work for us. So, and we haven't historically been at those tables. And if we've been at those tables of design, we haven't been heard. And we haven't also felt the safety to speak up even. And that's, I think, the sea change that we've seen over the last couple of years. And I'm so grateful for that. And I feel the door sort of wants to close. We're trying to prop our foot in it and say, no, We've needed to have this reset for a really long time. We've needed to reinvent the workplace for more of us, to work for more of us. And so fundamentally, this is this really exciting moment. But I think, but belonging is not only, it's not, I don't want to say it's a fad, but it is assuming its place in the alphabet, the acronym. I also might say A is another one that I'm seeing added, which is accessibility, because disability runs as a thread throughout all identities and touches so many of us, both acquired disability and also inherent or inborn disability. And we can just say this diversity of abilities is very present in our workforce too. So I'm seeing that added as well, and different playing with the acronyms. It depends on the company. I think it depends on their business case and what they want to lead with, and what their legacy and history is with these words and these letters, and what they feel like might reinvigorate the conversation and really speak to the goals and the nature of the company. I know I work with Cisco a lot, and they were the Office of Inclusion and Collaboration for a while, and they're kind of continuing to think about, what is the language? Language is so important in this work. What is going to attract the most folks and feel like this is something I want. This is something that I want to feel. This is something I want other people to feel. And it's something I can get behind, that perhaps doesn't feel as, dare I say, politicized. Unfortunately, I can't even believe, I have to say it. I wouldn't have said that even 6 months ago, but I think we're in a really unique, unfortunately, time where these wonderful concepts that we believe in have somehow been co-opted. So belonging may feel that it's a fresh start to have the old and good and perfect conversation.
That makes a lot of sense. And Jennifer, you're alluding to questions of time and how things have evolved. And so one of the things I think is most interesting, I mean, there are a lot of people who have entered the diversity consulting field more recently.
Mhm.
There was certainly a kind of, boom times post 2020. You are somebody who has been doing this for close to 2 decades. So you've
Oof.
had a really incredibly long span of being able to see trends, seeing how things have evolved. I'm just curious, what, at a broad level, what is your take? What is your perspective about how the work today, the reception today is different as compared to how things were in 2003, which seems like a
Mhm.
very long time ago?
Really long time ago. I do think in the old days, I sound so old, uh, a few hands were doing a lot of the work. The onus was, and in many cases, unfortunately, still is, on those who are most negatively impacted by inequitable workplaces, right? It's the women's network, it's the, Black and brown talent who are speaking up, who are really carrying a lot of the water for organizational change. But that was really, really true, I think, back then. Um, and it was a very intoxicating time, by the way. I don't want to paint it as a negative. Like it was, to me, I cut my teeth back in those days on winning, helping, be a part of the effort to win domestic partner benefits and help companies align to that, and discover this massive community of potential customers, and market responsibly to them, and hire from them, and promote, and begin to track their numbers, right? It was really amazing times. But now, I do think it's about allyship. If I could pick one theme that I've been really promoting, is, sharing the work, like really equipping ourselves. And I count myself also, and as an aspiring ally, even though I'm in the LGBTQ plus community, I need allies. In the last 3 or 4 years, my allyship has been front and center for me. It is beyond my one piece of my identity, where I needed that ally, and then also being female and needing male allyship in a cisgender sense. My pronouns are she, her, by the way. So I think, but it goes beyond that, my ethnicity, my socioeconomic background, my, the body I'm in, the things that I've been able to avail myself of, put me in a position where I can share my platform, where I can promote other voices, where I can shine a light, where I can step aside and step behind, back when needed, and where I can sponsor and share my capital with others, so that I make my own contribution to equity. So to me, this is like a 2.0. opportunity for all of us, by the way. Like, it's not just those of us who have privilege and those who don't. There's no such thing, really. I love to quote Kenji Yoshino, who says, "It's not play the pain Olympics." Like, it's not about comparing and contrasting oppression. It is, and we need to keep that in mind because there are differences. But in terms of what I'm talking about, we each have access to so much more than we are exercising right now. And I think leaving this to the D&I team or effort or the women in the organization, whatever, what I want to see is I'm in a room and I don't need to speak up because so many other people around me are capable of speaking up and confident enough to speak up, right? That makes less work for me, less fatigue for me, more partnership and more growth, honestly, for every leader and manager out there who, by the way, needs to practice inclusive leadership because it is honestly, it's missing from a lot of folks' repertoire. And it is very, very risky not to know how to do this. It's very risky to go forward into the future as a leader, as a company, and not have deep competency on this because it is going to make the difference between success and thriving and failure. And I wish more people understood it in those terms. This is not just nice to have. It's not side of the desk. It's integral to every leader's ability to thrive now and especially in the future. So if we can get people to see themselves in this and say, "Ooh, I have a vested interest in applying myself to this and learning how to do it," I think that's my biggest audience, honestly, is folks that are grasping for that skill development and the mindset that they need. And honestly, the courage, because it's so imperfect. It's so painful to show up and not know what to do. And yet, what we're being asked to do and how allies do is I don't have the answer, but I'll ask the questions. I'll raise the issues. I'll challenge myself. I'll challenge others. That is learning. That is learning. It's the growth mindset. And you can't come from fear. If you're not uncomfortable, you're not leading.
That's great. This is Dorie Clark with Better, our Newsweek weekly interview show. And our guest this week is Jennifer Brown. She's the author of How to Be an Inclusive Leader, which has its second edition recently put forward. So I want to just push on this a little bit because I think it's a really interesting question, Jennifer, about allyship. I think most people understand at work that, I guess I would say kind of the responsive ways to be an ally. If I'm in a room and somebody makes an offensive comment, somebody says something racist, somebody says something homophobic, like being a good ally is like, why did you say that? I can't believe you said that, whatever. But I think that many people might struggle to think about proactive ways to be an ally, that they're not necessarily sure how to do that. And, I'm assuming you believe there are, in fact, proactive variations of that. So can you give examples? Like, what does it actually look like to be an ally above and beyond, like, essentially standing up to bullies in a room?
Right. Yeah. I have so many thoughts on this. When for example, I'm a leader and I share my pronouns and I make it safe around me and make it clear that I don't assume that I understand how everybody identifies. That's something we should be doing all the time. You need to be sending signals out all the time that we are a leader who cares and does see difference, doesn't operate in the I don't see color category, as I would say, right? Or assuming the cisgender identity of everyone around you. Like, it's just, especially with younger talent, there's such a wide variety of ways to identify. And I think the best leaders lean into that. They assume that difference is present all the time, many differences that we can't see, many that we don't understand. And so I think that we can prompt these deeper questions and these deeper conversations and build trust. But the leader has to go first because leaders set a tone and they also cast a very long shadow, right? And we're always being watched. We're always being watched with every choice we make, what we say, what we don't say, what we stay silent on, what we don't have competency in, where we're reading the talking points versus where we're really speaking from the heart. So we have a lot of opportunity to storytell and get more personal as well. Every day I speak to audiences, somebody will say, I'm this and I'm that and I'm that and I'm that, but like I look like a white straight man, but this is my story. And I have to point out to those people, this matters. It matters to raise that you don't have a college degree and nobody knows, that you grew up in the way you did, that you have a neurodiverse kiddo, like that you are in a mixed race couple, that you have always felt like an outsider, in any system that you've been in. again, not to play the pain Olympics, but to unearth ways for people to feel that you are real and feel that you are a trusted person and that you're somebody that's going to be empathetic. And that's, again, really uncomfortable for leaders. So, who you story tell about, what you share, how many risks you take with people that are personal, revealing things that have forged who you are, and opening that door and doing all of this, sometimes without acknowledgement, without any sort of response. I think allies press forward. They are fearless and they know what needs to be done. And they say it even if it's the unpopular thing, and they put themselves out there, sometimes not even knowing whether you're making a difference. And that can make it really hard because most of us lead in like the context of, is this working, right? And we get sort of signals back about like, oh, this is good, this is not good. But allies, really, when you're an aspiring ally, it's all about impact. It's not intent too. So the humility to seek people out and say, hey, I saw that happen. I heard that happen. I'm not okay with that. What support do you need, if any? And allies have this the best have this ability to know when to step in, but also when to support and when to check in and when to ask about impact and how to shift and be resilient and not get your ego involved, because ultimately, like, the ego will tell you that this is dangerous and risky and scary and you're a bad person and all that noise of the ego. And really, I would recommend we sort of get back to, how can I humbly learn what I don't yet understand? And if we kind of wake up every day wondering that, and yeah, but I love your question because it isn't always about intervening. And sometimes it's about not intervening, because sometimes we can fall prey to the savior complex as allies and sort of sail in, on the horse. And it's really, not what's needed. And that's part of our education, to say, well, what is the best way I can support in this moment? Making the commitment to support, but letting it be shaped by others is I think part of what we come to realize as we stay in this work longer. Remember, you're only an ally if somebody in an affected community considers you an ally. It's not something we claim, and it's also a journey and not a destination.
That's a great point. Now, Jennifer, as our kind of coming into the denouement of our interview
Denouement.
here, one of the things that we do every week for the show Better is we have a Better Leader of the Week nominee. And our interview guest gets the opportunity to nominate someone that they believe is an exemplar of advancing diversity in whatever form that takes. You have identified someone who is Dr. Elijah Nicholas. And I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about who Elijah is and why you nominated him for your Better Leader of the Week.
Oh, Elijah is just such a loving human, teacher, facilitator, um, very authentic in his story as a trans man of color. Um, and we just met, we hit it off. I would trust him to the ends. And it's sort of one of those things that the way that he shows up, role modeling authentically, taking the risk of authenticity, which in his case is substantial, to create a space for people to learn the way that he meets people where they're at about issues of identity, of which he holds many that are not understood and under attack right now. So it was important to me to elevate his work, and to associate with him and make sure, in the way that I can, in the same way that he probably does for me, to shine a light on each other's work, because we are the messenger in this work matters as much as the message. It's something that we learn. It's why I am really aware that sometimes people need to hear from me, and sometimes they need to hear from somebody that identifies like Elijah does, that the package that we're in is part of what we teach from, and our lived experience is what we teach from. And the allyship that he and I can role model together is so powerful together. And I feel very much activated in my allyship when I'm with him, because I ask myself, am I doing enough? And he's somebody that I completely trust to call me in, I'm such a fan of the call in, and it's this beautiful invitation to learn and give coaching and feedback to those who are really wanting to help us, those that are really wanting to be in community with us and in solidarity with us. So these kinds of relationships are so important to me. I learn so much from them, more than I could ever learn from, watching a movie or reading a book. It's knowing a human. So I hope this results in a lot more folks knowing Elijah and his story, and really, elevating him, because it's really important to me, Dory, as part of the community of LGBTQ people who we have our own inclusion work to do. It's extremely important that I hold myself accountable and us accountable to highlight those voices that have been missing, because they are truly the oracles of how you talked about belonging, how belonging is going to play out. The scorecard that we're going to give and use on ourselves should have to do with Elijah's experience, not mine necessarily. And I want to hold him up as that arbiter, and then I want to take ideas and run with them as in terms of ways to support. So remember, there's diversity within the diversities that we talk about. And our job is really to elevate those that have not been heard from and have not been centered and have not been architecting what the future looks like. And he's one of mine.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Jennifer. We're very excited for Elijah Brown to be our, or no, wait, I'm marrying you off now. That's not appropriate.
I just played that up for you.
To be our better
Elijah
leader
Brown,
of the week.
my long lost brother. Yes.
Exactly. Very exciting. This has been a wonderful conversation. We have been here with Jennifer Brown. She is the author of How to Be an Inclusive Leader, second edition. And Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. For folks who want to learn more about Jennifer's work, go to Linktree. That's linktr.ee/Jennifer Brown Speaks to get all of the amazing links. And of course, check out her book, How to Be an Inclusive Leader. Jennifer, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Dorie. This was fabulous. So appreciate it.
Thank you all. See you next week.